topic of the panel is real promises of DePIN AI. Robert talked earlier about kind of how DePIN is creating value, and he talked about like how different parties are trying to capture that value. Let's just use this panel to get super specific and discuss how we're creating value specifically for AI use cases, and maybe we can dive into the specifics a bit, right? There's whatever inference, there's the training, there's the data creation that feeds these models. I think there's lots of ways to basically add value to AI. And then I'd love to hear how you guys are thinking about capturing some of that value, or who you're enabling to capture value by using your protocols and the technologies that you're building. And then because it says real promises, let's talk about both kind of the potential, the promises, but then let's also spend some time thinking about how we might chart a path to get to some of the things that maybe we'll ideate on, as opposed to being super specific. Let's start with, instead of kind of doing a round of introduction, let's just combine it with the first question, which is, how does the thing that you're working on create value in the context of AI, right? And use that to kind of talk about what you do, but try to be very specific in how it really creates value for AI. Cool. Go for it.
Hello. Hearing? OK. So I'm Aline. I'm Senior VP of Engineering at IONET. So we connect GPUs from data centers, crypto miners, consumer hardware, and offer a solution that's on demand to exactly distribute processing of AI workloads. So you can spin up a cluster and have different types of jobs of AI, like then you can think about batch inference or distributed training and other aspects of it. And the idea is that there is a increasing demand for GPUs, and we have all these underutilized GPUs. Like, we want to be this connection and offer an easier barrier of entry for them. So we've been recently investing a lot on facilitating the use of the clusters and also considering the nature of the decentralized network, which has some challenges.
Cool. OK, so what I'm hearing is basically helping GPU owners add their capacity, so we're augmenting the supply of hardware that can run AI workloads. Shannon, what does Livepeer do to create value in the context of AI?
Is this on? It's on. So I'm going to try and make this pithy. Livepeer is making it easy for developers who want to build generative media applications to access on-demand infrastructure for those AI inference jobs. So Livepeer is not in the business of training AI models. We're in the business of providing AI inference pipelines to developers. And what's novel about that developer gateway is that you can pay per use for your inference requirements. Right now, if you use centralized data servers, you have to pay for blocks of time, which is not efficient. So with Livepeer, the way our pipelines are set up for generative pipelines, and right now you can do text to image, text to video, image to video. You pay per inference task, so it's much more efficient.
And just help me understand what that looks like from a user perspective or from a developer perspective. They go to your website, or like, what does the interaction really look like?
Yeah, so you can, the docs right now are in alpha. So, I mean, the backstory behind the thing I just said is that we've just added the supply-side capabilities to our network. So for the last 5 years, node operators on Livepeer's decentralized video infrastructure network have been doing transcoding jobs, so video transcoding. But in the last 3 months, we've upgraded the protocol to allow our node operators to send and receive and execute jobs for AI inference while they're still doing GPU transcoding. So what does that mean? So That took some time. We just finished that. We have alpha developer docs, and anyone can go to livepeer.org, go into the docs, and play around with different gateway tools right now. But we will be improving the developer experience around that to make it even better over the next few months. But we've already had demo applications built on the subnet within the community. You can see a showcase of those applications. I think most all of those have open source code as well.
Got it. Okay. So what I'm hearing to a degree is like you've almost like taken an existing infrastructure that was creating value in a video encoding environment, and you've just repurposed it to now also kind of take some of those AI workloads and
exactly. So the market dynamics and the market mechanics are identical for video transcoding as they are for generative media inference right now. So any developers that need transcoding on the network are also paying per minute transcoded or per job transcoded. So we just kind of like took that architecture. It's the same payment mechanic. So node operators receive payments in ETH from gateways requesting these jobs. So we've been having a lot of success over the last few years with transcoding because it is 10 times cheaper than any traditional Web 2 cloud service for doing transcoding. And when you're streaming at scale, if you're operating something like Twitch or TikTok, your infrastructure bill gets really high. So we've seen success with that, and we're excited to have a big impact in the market around generative AI.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks so much. Handing over to you. How does what you do kind of create more value for AI services, maybe also unique value, right? Like what are some things that you can only do with decentralized? What does decentralized bring to the table in the context of AI?
Yeah. Hello, everyone. My name is Stepan. I'm from Cyberfund. Cyberfund is a venture fund. We invest in cybernetic economy for more than 10 years already. And cybernetic economy is this idea of like the different processes in the economy are manual or analog. You need like bureaucracy, you need banks, you need traditional institutions, and we invest in everything that helps us go into more programmable economy, which is run by and powered by mechanism design, decentralization, cryptography, and artificial intelligence. And I think if you look from high level on the AI and Web3 and DePIN, there's obviously a lot of applications of like AI can be helpful to any industry, including Web3, including blockchains, including any other vertical in the world. But I think the most important things are where do existing Web3 concepts and technologies help to advance AI or help make AI more decentralized, how to help make sure that AI is not controlled by single entity, that like everything that we think, buy, or find online is not controlled by Meta or OpenAI. And I would roughly or generally put it into 3 buckets. So first part is cryptography. So we have a lot of cryptographic tools that help us ensure that data, models, agents, interaction between autonomous agents is kept private. The integrity is there, authenticity of data, provenance of data. So that's kind of application of cryptography to existing AI products. Second part is incentives. I think a lot of previous panels were about that. So we can use mechanism design, economic design, tokens, smart contracts to ensure that different actors that participate in creation of AI tools are rewarded, and you also fight fraud and kind of malicious actors. And then the third piece is governance. Governance is hard. It is maybe not as kind of big right now because we're still figuring out governance in Web3. But it's also important because, again, we have all these kind of large corporations that spend hundreds of billions of dollars on building AI, which is good. They're advancing the technology and the industry, but fair and equal access to the benefits of AI and also making sure that AI remains unbiased is very important, and that's where kind of decentralized infrastructure, both physical and software, can help and is helping. And that's, I think, unique. These three are unique values that Web3 industry can bring to AI.
Cool. Okay, so cryptography, incentives, and what's the last one?
Governance.
Governance, right? As like the unique kind of things that decentralizing AI and like these kind of workloads bring to the table. I think that's super interesting, of course, because of like provenance and where data is generated and are people participating, right? There's a number of lawsuits, I think, that are ongoing where people are saying the contribution to this training data wasn't accurately rewarded, etc. So I think that's like really interesting and teasing out like why do we need to decentralize AI, right? In addition to what we heard before, which is driving down cost and repurposing tools, making it easier for developers to kind of contribute to innovate. Cool. Over to you and kind of maybe talking about why we need to decentralize AI. We know that we have heard some of the benefits. What else does decentralized AI bring, and then how do you create value with what you're doing?
Yeah, so my name is Vincent. I'm the founder of Intellect, and kind of like our focus in this context, like also building on what you already laid out, is really to aggregate all of the compute in the world, like even including from centralized providers, like not really making a distinction, and making basically the orchestration easier for training, for inference, for other workloads, and really with a focus initially on decentralized training. So basically, if someone wants to have a bunch of GPUs to train on them or to inference on them, there's now like hundreds of providers, and it's difficult to like orchestrate actually that workloads. And most AI developers don't know most of them because there's so many of them and are not integrated with them. So that's the core problem we realized talking to AI developers and AI researchers and startups is like all of them want and need access to cheap GPUs. Like it's kind of like the oxygen for them to breathe. And I think the core promise that crypto has in general is like it's really good at creating financial markets and creating efficient financial markets. And ultimately, I think compute will be the biggest market in the world. Like by far, I think might be the majority of GDP. It might be the majority of like financial assets. So I think crypto is pretty well positioned to basically drive down cost of capital to an extent, and the efficiency of like compute as an asset class as well. So I think that's like a good tailwind for bringing compute, but also even AI models and other like compute adjacent assets on chain and making them like tradable basically. And then concretely for like what we are building is, and already like have out there, is like really making it easy for people to use to compute from all the decentralized clouds, but also some of the centralized ones. And then not only train decentralized, but also basically figure out novel funding models for people to get compute to build AI models. So I spent the last few years in decentralized science, kind of like tokenizing IP, funding tens of millions of research on chain, and that worked. And ultimately, I think it's very similar for AI research, where there's like basically a lack of business models actually for open source AI. Like basically, you could either go the Anthropic or OpenAI route, raise billions, or obviously go fully open source like Llama, where there's kind of like a lack of incentives. But I think there will be like a lot of like middle grounds. The best example might be something like Stable Diffusion, like obviously one of the leading like image AI models. And it's freely available, but like if you want to use it as an enterprise, you have to pay them for all the cost that they had to train this model. And I think this model will become more popular, and I think could basically enable like collective funding of like open source AI models that actually get monetized and like get earn licensing revenues. Yeah, so that's maybe like the high level, but I think building on everything what everyone before said, I think there's like a lot of opportunities basically for the space.
Cool. I'd love to dig in on this financialization aspect, which is a really powerful tool that I think decentralized networks in general can use to bootstrap a bunch of GPUs and network into existence to attract developer attention, right? Like the incentives are really powerful, and you mentioned it as like one of the unique things that we can leverage in this space to grow. At the same time, there is also a risk in that it introduces a lot of noise to finding product market fit, right? Because you might have networks that optimize for growth and providers that optimize for mining incentives, as opposed to developing a product that finds product market fit and solves a real problem. So I'd be curious, like maybe starting backwards a little bit, like how you think about that, like how can we drive towards product market fit, something that AI, at least in a centralized context, has very powerfully demonstrated, right? With ChatGPT growing to 1 billion users like overnight. I don't know the exact numbers, but some super impressive growth. And now we have, in the decentralized space, we're leveraging incentives, we're growing GPU networks, we're able to attract developers, but we have yet to see this like aha moment, I think, of finding product market fit. So I'm curious, like how you think about, leveraging the potential of incentives, why not falling prey to the risk of diluting the signal to noise ratio when driving for product market fit?
Yeah, so like for us concretely, like when we observed the space and also followed like the Filecoins and the Cashs of the world, like in the first wave, like our key realization was that they basically were able to bootstrap incentives for the supply side and for bringing on compute, but usually had like huge friction for actually the demand side to use the now like much cheaper compute. So we kind of like inverted that and said, okay, like no one is using decentralized compute, let's face it, like literally no one. Like if you look at these networks, they have close to no usage right now. Like, and why? Like,
except Livepeer.
Yeah, maybe, and I mean it in a grand scheme, right? It's like 100% of compute usage in the world, like how much percentage of that is decentralized networks? It's less than 1%. Like, and much more less than 1%. And I think the key there is like why? Like in a lot of cases, you need like a Cosmos wallet, a Solana wallet to use it. AI developers in general, like and startups we talk to, like they have huge overhead dealing with crypto. So they don't want to deal with crypto. And like that's what we basically did is like we integrated a bunch of these decentralized compute networks and completely abstracted away crypto. Like they don't need to touch crypto. Like they can pay whatever they want, like with Stripe. And that's what like when you talk to users, that's what they want. Like they want cheap compute and they want to integrate and orchestrate natively, and like so that's basically the first step we took. On on the incentive side, we believe all of these networks will be great by basically having lower cost of capital, which is ultimately the key component to bootstrap the supply side. But you do need to bootstrap the demand side. But the demand side like doesn't need incentives; it just needs the cheapest GPUs. Like for example, but like if it can't use them, or if it's too hard to use them, or if they're unreliable, or if you promise an H100 and the H100 doesn't work, or the H100 doesn't even exist and it's a whatever, like V100. Like all of these things happen in these networks, and like we ran a bunch of experiments on a bunch of them, and like the reliability is not that great. Sometimes you don't even get what you're promised, etc., etc., etc. So we basically make those things easier to actually bootstrap demand, and ultimately, obviously, by also having the centralized providers, it's much easier because then you can tap into both sides. But I think to your question, I think we also need to, like it's a two-sided marketplace where like, yeah, I think the user experience is much more important than product market fit, than kind of like these artificial incentives that promise like product market fit, while it's actually just like incentives. And I think, yeah, basically the high level for me is like something like Filecoin I think works, but like the incentives ultimately are now much more like effective. Like initially they had to overcompensate with incentives, and I think now it's much more efficient. So I think with some of these earlier networks, you can see like they start quite aggressively with incentives, and then it becomes more efficient once there's kind of like efficient markets kicking in.
Yeah, got it. Aline, maybe to contrast that, right? Because you've very successfully shown again to build kind of supply side. There's a lot of interest in IONET, I think specifically, and they're kind of heralded as yet another example that has very successfully aggregated supply. Like how do you, like what does that make you think? Like is that truly a problem? Like how do you guys think about, you know, things like Prime Intellect, like solving a real problem there for you? Just
yes, as a network that we operate sort of as a broker, like we need to increase like consumers like and suppliers, and if only one side increase, then like you sort of need to optimize both sides. So definitely you don't want a high number of suppliers that are underutilized, and nor like users want GPU. So basically, like I would say, like the training model, distributed training model, like is more of a mid-long term, because I would say it's a harder task considering the decentralized network, and the inference it would be like a less harder task for the decentralized. So the way we see is like these models, like for inference, that you need to do inference at scale, at a global scale. Sometimes like overall like knowledge, like global knowledge, they will be like, they will create a steady flow on the network. Like they would be the first like less harder task like, to have this steady flow, and this is something that we are investing hardly. And for the training part, part of it is research and engineering at the same time, because we can see like the communication, like when everyone is working in the office, like everyone can synchronize with everyone instantaneously. So it's like the distributed training requires that all the nodes needs to sync very frequently. So if they are very distant, like it's a harder task. And for inference, like it's more independent task that they can take, so the communication is lower. It's not, but it's possible that we improve the way of the communication of distributed training, but it's a working process. It's a heavy research taking place like at Meta, at universities, and also at IONET, because the same way like we thought that we could work only on the office, we couldn't work like in the decentralized manner. When the pandemic came, like we suddenly learned that, yes, we can communicate remotely. We don't sync the way we sync before, but create another protocol of communications. So in this distributed training, there are ways that, and the research are around how you change the communication protocol. The different ones, like gossip is one of them that we also have in Office too, the gossip protocol. So like how you change the different protocols. So there is, answering like there's space for distributed training, there's space for global scaling, and the global scaling would be the less harder task, and that's the one that will take the most share of our network in the short term.
Got it. So I'm hearing kind of like be realistic on the types of demands that you can actually solve, and then just go after those as opposed to solving it. Oh, go ahead if you.
Yeah, like the one thing I would add, which I think is like very true to your point, and like it's the one main thing like we also saw as a problem is basically like for context, like on these big training runs, right, by OpenAI and Anthropic, they have all of them centralized in one cluster. They synchronize every training step, like literally milliseconds or in seconds. So it really becomes impossible, like in a decentralized context. But what was interesting for us, and one of the also like inspirations to tackle decentralized training was actually DeepMind kind of like solving this recently in like December with like a project called like DLoco, like distributed low communication training, where they only synchronize every, for example, 500 steps, which might be only every few hours. And that's basically what we're replicating right now. So we're training, like we're basically open sourcing their research and scaling their research. And it's starting to work. Like obviously it does have downsides, but like if the GPUs are 3-4 times cheaper, and if you can basically aggregate the cheapest GPUs in the world, then you suddenly have such a cost advantage that ultimately it's okay if it's 20-30%, whatever, like more inefficient to train decentralized, if it's 80% cheaper or something.
Yes,
so
there is even research that shows that you can, even in a gel-distributed nodes, like by reviewing the way you communicate, the protocol of communication, like not that everyone syncs with everyone, but different nodes, and then they sync at other levels, they can be even like more efficient. So this is something that we have. So this would be like mid-long term, and we see that the inference will be as a less harder task would be, and beyond the geopolitical aspect, like having more supply joining this network and having some libraries on top of it that can streamline the process is something that needs to exist. Like we cannot have idle GPUs while we have a lot of AI demand. So I joined IONET like because I said this is something that needs to exist. I was before like 20 years working in software industry with distributed computing for 10 years with biggest APC cluster in Latin America and then the 2 years at Amazon, but they are all centralized. So it's a hard task, but it's easier in this aspect that we're centralized. And for me, like, this decentralized is a real challenge. And I joined IONET not in spite of the challenge, but because of the challenge. So I think the problem needs to be solved, and I think we are well positioned to solve this problem. Like, we are reaching 100 in the team, so we are taking this, grasping this very seriously to have and also be a place that research can take place and test these different algorithms on top of the network.
Yeah, what to be like, maybe a little bit play the devil's advocate, it does sound to a degree a problem that is still looking for a solution, right, where you have the supply and then you now have to figure out a way to affect the cost structure in a way that you can actually compete with something that's centralized. And once you do, then you're actually like in a mode where you can start to compete. I'm wondering, Shannon, like for you guys, because you kind of interjected earlier, except for Livepeer. So like, how do you guys, the other way, by the way, right, to go about this would be like, what's a big problem that a customer has? And like, how do we solve it? As opposed to like
Livepeer is very focused on a very specific use case, and that's video and media workflows. So we're not looking at the generic space of AI compute. Even when you look at inference, I think there's like an infinite number of inference tasks that need compute. We're really focused on understanding what are the use cases and really new internet and consumer applications that are being built with generative AI and what inference tasks are adding value around video workflows. So specifically, you can just start with creation, right? So that's where we've started. We've already added AI inference pipelines to our decentralized network for text to image, for image to video, as I mentioned. We support any Hugging Face diffusion models in order to do that. There's some work that our community is doing to make it really easy for anyone to bring their own model for those jobs, but we're also really rapidly building out pipelines for video upscaling, scene classification, like all of the really specific job types that make sense for video, because we don't want to be, everything for everyone, because it's really hard to find product market fit that way.
Cool. Let's switch. How much time do we have left? Can I get like 5 minutes? Okay, great. Then let's switch gears a little bit and talk a little bit about the governance thing, because I think one of the aspects that you outlined earlier is like the key differentiators that decentralization can bring here. I'm curious, like, what are some of what's your vision kind of for an AI service that is, governed in a decentralized manner, and like, how does that look different to, the corporate, whatever, dystopia that we're now collectively learning to fear, right? Like, maybe paint a bit of a picture on how, we talked about incentives. How does the governance and decentralizing those aspects, like, help us work towards a brighter AI future?
Yeah, so governance and coordination is kind of the final boss of everything in Web3. That's the hardest problem, and that's why it exists. Like, Bitcoin is trying to solve the problem of governance in monetary system. Ethereum is trying to solve governance problem in kind of compute verifiable and compute specifically for financial use cases. And none of those are, like, this job is not done, and it won't be done for maybe decades to come. And we're talking about AI because it is just one of those use cases that will probably be at least as important as money, but maybe even more, because in 5 years, in 10 years, we will use AI assistants to do everything, to organize conferences, to find jobs.
The whole panels will just be, will all be AI agents.
Digital twins will be answering questions on the panels. So, and there's just the existing coordination system is not fit for digital future. We see that politicians deciding monetary policies in their interest or in interest of them being re-elected is not like working for many countries. At least, like, I want like shield Bitcoin, but and the same thing will happen and already happening in AI. So there's a few companies that spend a lot of money. AI is super capital intensive, and compute and model training are two kind of the most expensive parts of it. So those organizations who own compute, who train the models, they then will be able to monetize and kind of influence what these models are doing and why. And governance can be, we can look at governance from two angles. First angle is automation of human governance. So maybe we can have a DAO or token voting to allocate training resources towards some model that will benefit, I don't know, healthcare research. And governance, second kind of angle to look at governance is self-governance. How do we make kind of automated systems using mechanism design, using on-chain autonomous agents that are able to make decisions more effectively, more efficiently than people do, because they think with the speed of light, because they have access to a lot of information, and because we kind of use these models of kind of game theoretically optimal design that we do in existing blockchain networks. And autonomous agents are one approach of trying to solve this.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of good points there. I was also almost drawn into crypto by governance, by the first DAO, which got me excited, and getting into this space for that. But ultimately, I think there's different layers to it, and I think one relevant one is seeing that still obviously the majority of the world is not on crypto rails yet, right? I think that it's kind of especially for AI, I think there's a lot of ideas Sam Altman put out there. Even though one might disagree on a lot of things with him, I think he's also right on a lot of things where to an extent, we need universal basic compute and incomes, etc. And we need a way for basically every human in the world to help govern AGI basically, or more powerful AI systems. But I think connected actually on the crypto part, and even to be honest, on political level, on protocol level, on an AI level, I think how the future might play out, and I think it's to an extent even how politics works, is that people reveal their preferences and refine them over time. I don't want to vote in a DAO. I'm totally honest, it's too much time. I don't want to vote on every decision by a government or by an AI organization. I just want to refine my preferences over time. It's what do you care about? What should the government, what should your company, what should your protocols or whatever do for you based on your preferences, right? What do you care about and what do you want to an extent optimize? And I think that's the future, where there's a risk if there's one centrally governed AGI that is governed by the US government or the CCP or whatever with their preferences, which are different than your and my preferences and different than anyone else's preferences, from political biases to a bunch of other things. And so I think we need a future where everyone can basically program their almost preferences and thus govern AI, govern everything else, including crypto. And I don't think the current crypto governance really works that well, or has that active participation. And I think that's one of the also things which I think crypto could deliver today, have AI agents where you ask answer a few questions and then it just votes on your behalf based on your preferences. And I think with delegation and whatever, and I think that's an interesting prototype for scaling this to a bunch of other things, including AI itself.
I think what's also important here is that the presence of alternative ways of governance, right, as opposed to centralization, doesn't necessarily mean that they materialize for all sorts of reasons, right? One is absenteeism, that people just don't vote even if they have the opportunity to. So I think it's great to kind of have that as a chance, but we need to realize that it does take a lot of work, and we will be competing with a very powerful centralized system. So I think there's a lot of promise for decentralization to do good, but it's not at all a given, right? And I think that's go ahead.
Yeah, and a lot of AI, and not just AI, but a lot of projects in crypto, we can think of it as a sandbox, really. A lot of things exist just for speculation. And there's maybe a good idea, good token, it listed on Binance, everybody buys it, and there's no product. That's fine, because this is the way how we can test the systems before going into production. Because previously, like think of large corporation or think of like a nation state or country. If you want to change a governance system, it usually takes decades, and you're lucky if you like don't end up in war or revolution and a lot of people dying. So the fact that we have this on-chain sandbox system with not a lot of people, but a lot of actual value, so a lot of incentive to try and make it right, is good because we can do many experiments. Like I can launch a DAO that consists of autonomous agents that are trying to maximize my own kind of benefit, try to benefit me. And in 1 week, I can try one approach to governance, maybe like a direct democracy. And second week, I try a delegation. And third week, I try maybe like a more autocratic approach. And at the end of the month, I get actual empirical results, what works best. So because it's programmable, we can apply scientific method to governance, to coordination globally, and not wait hundreds of years and not like end up in like bad scenarios like revolutions.
The one thing I would add is like, which I think is one of the most fascinating concepts in this direction, is stuff like future key in this direction, where you could basically reveal preference functions, then run prediction markets, and then basically have almost like a market and your like preferences like govern everything. Like, and I think that's like worth trying also in the crypto context and then scaling it to other spaces.
Yeah, I do think there's a lot of, that's cool, right? Like we can experiment with different governance mechanisms without the risk of killing a lot of people. And I think that's really useful. But I also do think, and I don't have a great answer right now, but like my intuition is that governance is not a problem that can be that has an optimal solution, right? There's like a bunch of, probably different equilibria that are optimal for different. Anyways, a topic for another debate. I think I'll close now. On the topic of governance, everyone who can vote should vote in the real elections because they're happening right now. Cool. Cheers. Thanks, everyone.
Great. Thank you guys for a great panel. Round of applause, please.